don't understand what's going on here.
Jet Set Radio!
Takes place in Tokyo-to, basically real-life Tokyo. The streets are run by gangs made up of young inline skaters who spray paint the streets, dubbed Rudies. The local gangs include the Noise Tanks, Poison Jam, and the Love Shockers. Each defend their district from the constant turf wars that break out. Regardless of the gang, they all listen to the same underground radio station.
Jet Set Radio! We'll leave your mama gawking and your daddy walking. Let's go to the mailbag. A letter from Mr. Osaki asks, how do I get rid of these nasty roaches? Easy, just burn your house down!
Hosted by the vibrant DJ who broadcasts updates to what's going down in the streets of Tokyo-to. In response to the gangs, the cops start clamping down on the Rudies. Led by Captain Unishima, he's tasked to resolve the conflicts in a peaceful manner. The story follows the Djing, a newly formed gang led by Beat, the game's mascot. He teams up with fellow Rudies Gum and Tab. Shortly after their formation, their home turf is attacked by an unknown person. It's up to them to reclaim Shibuya-cho while battling rival gangs, running from the feds and dealing with a mysterious organization, the Rokuku Group.
Jet Set Radio!
Was developed in the late 90s, where youth culture in Japan was full of high-spirited energy. It was a time of youth rebellion against the social standards of Japan. Groups like the Yankee, or Gyaru, sprang up. Yankee being a movement embracing the punkish attitude of the West. Delinquents would join bike gangs, pop shit squads, and smoke some doobies. Gyaru was led by female high school students, rejecting the ideal physical appearance instilled by Japanese society. Girls would dye their hair blonde, use excessive makeup, or tan their skin. Smilebit, the development team, took inspiration from movements of this period. Characters stand out with colorful and quirky designs, taking influences from Japanese pop culture of the late 90s, and looking to create a cool and iconic style. This gave way to its cel-shaded aesthetic, being one of the first video games to make use of it. The soundtrack follows suit on the stylistic choice to effortlessly blend with the high-energy attitude. The art director looked to add music he was into during the late 90s of Japan. The music scene at the time blended big beat, rock, hip-hop, and DJ culture, but with a Japanese spin. These influences can be heard throughout the soundtrack to create an upbeat and charismatic vibe. There is a ton of samples taken from hip-hop, soul, and other genres of the early 80s. Many of the songs are layered with distorted voice lines that are chopped up in different orders. Much of the project being composed by Hideki Naganuma, composing 8 out of the 21 tracks. In an interview, he states that his inspiration was taken from Ueda's artwork for his pop, sweet, and cool characters. Additional tracks were made by other artists such as David Soul, Richard and Guitar Vader. The soundtrack features influences from J-pop, funk, and electronic dance. As a whole, the project is an anthem for angsty, rebellious teens.
Hip-hop.
Hip-hop is used when referring to rap music, but the term also refers to the culture surrounding MCing, graffiti, DJing, and b-boying. The culture emerged from the poor communities of the Bronx, New York, in the late 70s. The graffiti movement started in '72 by teenagers who sprayed on the walls of New York's subway system. Graffiti included mural-sized pieces of their names, also known as tags, underground comics, or television shows. It was quickly associated with criminal activity and delinquency. The officials responded by installing barbed wire fences and sending out undercover police squads. This parallels Jet Set Radio's use of graffiti and the police as gameplay elements. The player's goal is to spray up rival territories and claim it as your own. Doing this while simultaneously evading the dogs, helicopters, tanks, and jetmen that they sent out to kill you peacefully. Smilebit went even as far as to get Eric Hayes to create the graffiti for the game. Hayes being influential artist to bring graffiti into the mainstream and legitimize it as an art form. His work includes album covers for early hip-hop artists like Public Enemy, The Beastie Boys, and LL Cool J. B-boying, not to be mistaken with breakdancing, is a style of street dancing. It's usually danced to hip-hop, funk, or breakbeats. Without complicating it, there are 4 moves to b-boying: top rock, down rock, power moves, and freezes. Top rock being any string of steps done from a starting position. Down rock is any movement on the floor using hand and feet to support the dancer. Power moves are any acrobatic moves like the back or head spin. Finally, freezes are stylish poses that have the dancer suspending off the ground. Jet Set Radio's characters are in a constant state of dance, especially the GGs, each having a unique dance when completing a level or on the character's select screen. Many of their dance moves reference b-boy moves like the top rock, freezes, and power moves. They aren't one for one, but there is a relation to the real dance. Djing is the art form of beat mixing records on a turntable. Techniques can range in complexity, from standard scratching to manipulating disc speed and effects, all while blending in samples and sounds to the record. The goal of a DJ is to take the audience on a journey. There's no right way to DJ. It's about getting them to vibe to your shit. Since DJs perform on the spot, they must feel out what the crowd is feeling. For those uninitiated, sampling is the art of reusing a portion of a sound recording and repurposing it. Samples can be anything from vocals, sounds, or beats.
Could lead to getting teeth capped or even a reef from armed dudes on some brief crap. I suggest a change of diet.
DJs especially like to blend in obscure tracks, oldies, or new tunes into their performances. It can be a way for artists to pull deep references out that the listener may not even know. It's the backbone to how hip-hop established itself as a genre. Jet Set Radio embraces this with its wide variety of samples. Several are taken from genres of hip-hop, soul, funk, electronic dance, and disco of the late 80s. The soundtrack uses a total of
71
samples. It's crazy to see this amount of sampling used, let alone in a video game soundtrack. It's clear that the artists pay homage to the musical roots it's taking influence from. Other DJ techniques like scratching, distorted voice lines, and mixing effects are present across the project. The track Everybody Jump Around, composer Richard, uses elements of funk and DJ culture. That is way better than it used to be. The track samples 10 different sources, ranging from the Beatles' I Saw Her Standing There to 1942's film Casablanca. The game's story is narrated by Professor K. He's not a complex character, but he has his witty moments. Simply put, Professor K is a DJ, so I felt that I should at least mention him. Overall, Jet Set Radio's punkish aesthetic reflects a defined attitude hip-hop shared during its upbringing. The game makes nods to hip-hop culture in a creative way. It's about people wanting to escape the pressures of authority and have an outlet for self-expression.
That funk, baby, funk.
Funk laid the foundation for most American dance music of the 90s. There's strong importance put on rhythm. Tempos can range from slow burns to explosive dance energy, fusing elements of jazz, pop, rock, gospel, and blues. Funk features strong bass lines layered with instrumentation and heavy, syncopated beats. The birth of funk dates back to the 70s, a transformative period of American history, following the civil rights movement. Funk being the triumphal anthem for black folk all around. Artists like James Brown, Stevie Wonder, and George Clinton spearheaded the funk movement, laying the foundation for future genres like hip-hop, funk, rock, and disco to emerge. Like I mentioned earlier, Jet Set Radio takes influence from funk with funk samples, funk beats, and funk aesthetic. The opening track, Humming the Bass Line, composed by Hideki Naganuma, is the embodiment of funk. The thumping bass line paired with the humming vocals create an infectious groove. Naganuma mixes in sporadic sampled voice lines, dipped in various types of modulation, taking samples from Feel the Heartbeats, The Treacherous 3, and John Davis's I Can't Stop. It's personally my favorite song of the project. Similar tracks like Sneak Man or That's Enough ooze that spontaneous vibe in a similar fashion.
Big beat.
Big beat is a strand of electronic dance that rose to popularity in the late 90s, originating in the underground dance scene of the UK, coming into existence as a way to get people dancing for hours on end. The genre's origin tends to be associated with the clubbing or raving scene. Performances are explosive, relying on the charisma and energy of the artist playing. Influential artists such as The Prodigy, Fatboy Slim, and Chemical Romance were leading faces of the genre. Albums like The Fat of the Land and You've Come a Long Way are considered highlights of the short-lived hype of Big Beat, losing popularity into the early 2000s. Musically, like funk, it strongly emphasizes rhythm, foregoing vocals and almost entirely for upbeat and intense build-ups. The beat taking most of the attention, accompanied with crazy drops and drum rolls that explode into dance. Tracks are on the longer side, with looping beats and long build-ups. Like hip-hop, sampling is an element of the genre's identity, many taking the sound in an experimental direction, using sound from their contemporary genres. A big chunk of Jet Set Radio's soundtrack takes influence from Big Beat. Tracks like Miller Ball Breakers and Yappy Feet are just two instances on the project, both layered with synth bass lines to form an upbeat tempo. Looking at Miller Ball Breakers, the track samples Do It, Do It, Here Comes That Beat, and Best of My Love, both pointing to 80s hip hop and the latter to late 70s soul. Even on parts of the project where Big Beat isn't musically obvious, it stays consistent with the energetic and dance attitude of the 90s. There's a perpetual state of dance, grooving to that big beat. Jet Set Radio's soundtrack exemplifies that rebellious and high spirit of being a teenager. Every track adds to the tone of dynamism. There are duds that have felt boring for me, but it still accomplishes its goal. The music doesn't just supplement the game, but embodies it. There was a lot of passion put into it, from the funky beats to the samples used. The music and visuals blend effortlessly to create a distinct Tokyo toe. It's actually the main reason I stuck through with the game, despite its age showing. Also, this game is known for its music, so I wanted a chance to make a video on it. It continues to have an online following and has gone on to inspire fan-made albums and remixes. Other side notes: in this video I didn't touch on some genres like disco and punk rock, because I felt that they weren't as pronounced in the game. Hip hop, funk, DJ culture, and Big Beat being the biggest influences on the soundtrack's creation. I hope you enjoyed. Leave a like, subscribe, comment on what you thought, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.
We got another letter from Osaki. He says, I burned my house down. What should I do now? How should I know, fool?